Good evening. Far-left activists in the civil service need to be sacked. They're also threatening to take the government to court if they are told to ignore ECHR rulings and send people to Rwanda. This is a matter of border security. Both leaving the ECHR and having tighter border controls are issues the British public feel very, very strongly about. So, the activist civil service will be ignoring both the will of the government and the will of the people.
I mean, where do you even start with this bollocks? Suggesting that civil servants
need to be sacked
for following the Civil Service Code, which requires them to uphold the rule of law and administration of justice, is just ridiculous.
They're also threatening to take the government to court if they are told to ignore ECHR rulings and send people to Rwanda.
Well, imagine the shock for GB News when they find out that what the FDA union is actually doing is courageously defending the integrity of the civil service, upholding the rule of law and the administration of justice.
Are you prepared to breach international law in order to get those flights off?
So look, if you're asking me, are there circumstances in which I will ignore Rule 39s, then the answer is clearly yes.
That was UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak proudly announcing he's willing to break international law in order to get flights off the ground to Rwanda by ignoring Rule 39 orders, which are issued by the European Court of Human Rights on an exceptional basis, where there is a real risk of serious and irreversible harm.
You know, the bill contains a very specific power that makes it clear that it's for ministers to decide whether to comply with temporary Rule 39 orders. Now, we wouldn't have put that power in there unless I was prepared to use it.
Ignoring a Rule 39 order would be a breach of international law, and the Prime Minister knows it. The President of the European Court of Human Rights has responded with this.
There is a clear legal obligation under the Convention for states to comply with Rule 39 measures.
By now, even Larry the Cat knows that the UK will be in breach of its international legal obligations if it refuses to comply with Rule 39 orders. In fact, the government's own legal advice says as much.
But what we have also done is amended the guidance for civil servants that make it crystal clear that if ministers do make that decision, that civil servants will implement that decision.
The Prime Minister telling the press conference he's amended the guidance for civil servants so that a minister can direct a civil servant to ignore a ruling of the European Court of Human Rights. Just think about that. It would mean a civil servant being told to break the law. Civil servants have a legal obligation under the Civil Service Code to uphold the rule of law and administration of justice. Neither ministers nor guidance can overrule the legal obligation of the Civil Service Code. Only an Act of Parliament can do that. So what the government has done with this new legislation is deliberately create a potential conflict between any instructions that might be given by a minister and the legal obligations under the Civil Service Code if a minister was to decide to ignore a Rule 39 order.
The most important fact is that we now have civil servants who appear to be blocking government policy.
Simply not true. The FDA union, which represents civil servants, has been left with no choice but to mount a court challenge to the government's new Rwanda law by submitting an application for judicial review on the issue of whether a minister can direct a civil servant to ignore an ECHR ruling. The union simply wants the High Court to decide whether that would mean the civil servant was breaking the law and therefore the Civil Service Code of Conduct. And remember this, if a minister was to ask a civil servant to do something that broke the law, that civil servant would have a legal obligation to refuse. And neither ministers nor guidance can overrule the Civil Service Code. Only Parliament can do that. No one is above the law. Not even this government.
Both leaving the ECHR and having tighter border controls are issues the British public feel very, very strongly about.
When did the British public express the view that it would like to join Russia and Belarus as the only European countries outside the Human Rights Convention? A convention which protects our right to a fair trial, freedom of assembly and expression, the right to participate in free elections, freedom of religion, freedom from discrimination, the right to privacy, freedom from torture and degrading treatment.
So, the activist civil service will be ignoring both the will of the government and the will of the people.
Seriously? A damning parliamentary report from the Cross-Party Joint Committee on Human Rights has found the government's Rwanda Bill is fundamentally incompatible with the UK's human rights obligations, erodes the protections laid down in the Human Rights Act, contravenes parts of the European Convention on Human Rights, and falls short of the UK's commitment to comply with international treaties. And if all that's not bad enough for you, the report found the actions the Prime Minister is taking actually places the UK's hard-won reputation for the rule of law and human rights in jeopardy. Parliamentary sovereignty does not give this government the power to determine that a barefaced lie is the truth, which is what this bill does. The government is actually giving itself the power to declare that the objective truth of facts decided by our courts can just be overruled. Just think about that. The objective truth of facts decided by our courts can just be overruled. Allowing this to happen is a big step towards a dictatorship. When did that become the will of the people?